This is one of my favorite Star Wars stories. You know the one where the big ship captures the smaller ship and imprisons their crew, and then the Jedi and the ex-military guy dress up in the stormtrooper armor to sneak aboard and stage a daring rescue? Yeah, it's Star Wars Rebels, a new stealth strike. Hi, I'm artist Spencer Brinkerhoff III, and I'm here to break down the latest episode of Star Wars Rebels Stealth Strike. This episode was written by Matt Michnovetz. Thanks, Matt. Really love the show. When we last left the crew of the Ghost, there was an ongoing tension and distrust between retired clone commander Rex and our undercover Jedi Kanan. The conflict between them has their young cadet/apprentice Ezra volunteering for various assignments just to get away from them for a little bit. In this, the 7th episode of Season 2, we find Ezra off on a mission with Commander Sato. Their ship gets pulled right out of hyperspace. Now, how does that even happen? Well, oh yeah, I'll tell you how it happens. It's a new prototype Star Destroyer, and that Star Destroyer is called the Interdictor Cruiser. They were able to alert the rebels of their situation just before the transmission was jammed. So Commander Hera was able to send Kanan, Rex, and of course Chopper to rescue them. As Kanan and Rex are forced the Star Wars pun. Yes, as they were forced to work together to help Ezra, the walls of distrust crumble and they start to have a newfound respect for one another. This has been my favorite episode of the season. One of the things that you always have to watch out for when making a new Star Wars story is ensuring that it has that right balance. The environment has to balance. It has to feel like those movies that you fell in love with. But if it's too on the nose, it just feels like a cheap copy. You want it to be a real love letter and not a clone of the original content. This episode, it totally was that love letter. Now let's go over some of my favorite parts. First, I'm sorry, but I was never into the Star Wars role-playing games. But the concept for the Interdictor Cruiser was included in the Imperial sourcebook from West End Games. The game developers had figured out that if their ship could create a gravity well, then they could keep other ships from escaping the area. Now this is just one of those developmental steps on the road to the creation of the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. I love the way that Star Wars Rebels is continuing to look to the Star Wars legends to develop their stories. And speaking of that past, let's check out Admiral Brom Titus. Now he wasn't, to my memory, actually part of the previous films, but the design of Brom Titus was very much influenced by the local extras that were hired in the 1970s while making the original Star Wars movie. I mean, come on, check out those sideburns. This guy, he was the embodiment of the cold and arrogant Imperial officers that we saw interacting with Darth Vader in A New Hope. But that arrogance is what led to his ultimate failure. He totally called out Ezra on his Jabba the Hutt alias. I mean, come on, Ezra. You gotta break it up a little bit and come up with some new aliases every now and again. So he showed that he knew who Ezra was, but he underestimated Ezra's abilities, and he ended up watching his ship go down in flames from that little tiny window in his escape pod. Speaking of Ezra's aliases, nothing is more Star Wars, that's a thing, right? Beat Star Wars, than having your heroes dress up like stormtroopers and head out on a rescue mission. It was even more satisfying because we had Captain Rex, one of the original troopers, gearing up. Each of our rescue heroes get to show off their own strengths in this episode. We see Rex as he recites Imperial military codes to ensure that their ship has access, to ensure their access to the ship, and then Kanan uses his Jedi mind tricks to pass by those guards, and Rex says, "Oh, I've seen better." In the end, they were able to realize, these two guys working together, that they were really better working together than working against each other. And that led up to this brilliant scene.
We don't have time for this. I'll pull, you fire.
Just like old times.
Settle down, Captain.
What's going on?
And I love the way that Rex kept complaining about the cheapness of the armor and its tight fit. Now granted, he maybe wasn't the same size anymore, but that tight-fitting, cheap armor, it leads us to this little compilation of Rex doing a little dance I like to call the Armor Bites.
You know what? Yo. You know what?
What, man?
You know what? Yo. That's true. I step on stage, break a leg and a ligament. If you catch spitting fat and protracted, I will. My skills no for noxious, not like NyQuil. I'm ill as age patients when I start the PlayStation.
Rex and Kanan weren't the only ones that got dressed up in this mission. In this episode, Chopper also returned to his paint scheme last seen when he was impersonating Imperial Communications Droid 264 to help rescue Kanan. It was in the episode titled Rebels Resolve. Can I also say that I love that these little droids are wearing the Imperial Press Corps logo. This is the official logo of the journalists that are recruited to join the HoloNet News networks. Hey, I'm kind of part of this news network. I need to get me one of those pins. Anybody? Okay. Now let's talk about the humor in this episode. Apologies to my friends in the 501st, but those stormtroopers and their junk armor tend to be the butt of almost every joke in this episode. Rex couldn't see in the helmet, and that led to a comment by Kanan, and he said that Rex really did shoot like a stormtrooper. And Ezra took out both of them with his stun blaster. I mean, what's that armor even protecting them from? Then, and I just love this, as Ezra tries to cover up the fact that he had just shot his two friends, that jerk droid Chopper projects a holographic loop of Ezra shooting them. And I'm sure that Chop posted that thing on the HoloNet version of Instagram. Hashtag R2D who, right? Okay. In the end, Rex does his duty. He holds off the troops so that Kanan can escape with the prisoners. And can I just also point out that it took 2 stun blasts to take down Rex. That guy's tough. Kanan can't leave him behind, and he's able to rescue him from the ITO interrogator droid. I'm sure that thing was heading in for a lethal injection when he saved the day. The interchange at the end of this scene sums up the whole episode.
Wow. Nice to know you care. Don't ruin this.
Lastly, I'd like to cover some of the highlights of this episode. There are so many to choose from. Now, as an artist myself, I am always thrilled to see how Sabine's art makes its way into each one of these episodes. So a big shout out to Chris Glenn for this awesome illustration of Rex and Kanan that made its way into the back of the ship that they had stolen. Again, I always keep stealing those ships. In the latest Rebels Recon episode, Pablo Hidalgo said that he thought that the stormtroopers, that they never really intimidated Ezra very much. So now we can see that Ezra has added some new Jedi skills to his other skills and his abilities to sneak around and avoid trouble. He is really becoming unstoppable. Seeing him in this episode was awesome to see his growth. I also like to think that his lightsaber is the perfect example of the new type of Jedi that he's becoming. The blade embodies everything that he's learning from Kanan. about the ways of the Jedi, but his blade also includes a blaster, and this embodies the military tactics and the skill that he's learning from Rex. I love the way that he switches between his weapons to overcome the troopers. I mean, using the Force to ignite the blade on the stormtrooper's belt, and as he's hopping around, he does that cool flip thing and brings his binders up in front of him. I mean, this kid has some serious skills. And speaking of skills, another one of my favorite parts, isn't it great hearing Matthew Wood, the voice of General Grievous in Episode 3? He's like every other extra in this show. I imagine him, sitting there doing his audio work, listening and whatnot. He's working there at Lucasfilm and he goes, oops, hey guys, it looks like we missed a couple lines of dialogue. I'll just record these myself. Yeah, I want that guy's job. Thank you all for tuning in today. This has been a bit of a change from the normal Rebels Roundtable that I've been part of on the Forcecast. I'm interested to hear what you think of this new format. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars and I love to talk about it. This video production was written, shot, and edited all by myself. And if you'd like to see some more of the work that I do, my art, my illustration, my animation, or any of the other crazy project that I'm involved with, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook at SpencerB3. Now stay tuned for the next episode of Star Wars Rebels, where the Empire proves just how terrible they are by stealing babies. I'm Spencer Brinkerhoff III. Thanks for watching.